Breaking news that's sending shockwaves through global energy markets right now. The United States has just completed its first sale of Venezuelan oil since the dramatic capture of President Nicolás Maduro on January 3rd. And we're talking about a deal valued at $500 million. But here's what should concern every American. This is just the beginning of what could be the most controversial energy arrangement in modern U.S. history. Think about this for a moment. Less than 2 weeks after U.S. Special Forces pulled off one of the most audacious military operations in recent memory, Washington is now brokering oil deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars with a country that was considered a hostile nation just weeks ago. In the next 17 minutes, I'm going to break down exactly what's happening here, who's profiting from these deals, and what this means for American energy independence, global oil markets, and the future of Venezuela itself. Let me walk you through exactly what just happened because the details here are absolutely critical. According to a U.S. administration official who spoke to Reuters on January 14th, the United States has completed the sale of Venezuelan oil worth approximately $500 million. This represents the first transaction in what the Department of Energy is calling a $2 billion deal reached earlier this month between Washington and Caracas. And it gets worse when you understand the timeline. Here's the background you need to know. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Forces carried out Operation Absolute Resolve, capturing Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife from their fortified compound in Caracas. The operation came after Trump imposed a partial oil blockade on Venezuela starting in December, effectively cutting off the country's primary revenue source. According to multiple sources familiar with the situation, Venezuela's state oil company was literally days away from shutting down the country's main crude producing areas when Maduro was captured. We're talking about permanent damage to oil fields that hold the world's largest proven reserves. Now, less than 2 weeks later, the Department of Energy is orchestrating the sale of approximately 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil that's been sitting in storage since the blockade began. The revenue from these sales is being held in U.S.-controlled bank accounts with the main account located in Qatar. Why Qatar? Industry sources say it represents a neutral venue where funds can move with U.S. approval without risk of seizure. But here's where this story takes a troubling turn. The Trump administration selected two massive global commodity trading firms to execute these sales, Trafigura and VTOL. These companies have already paid Venezuela about $50 per barrel and have shipped more than 4 million barrels as of Wednesday. According to people familiar with the deal, much of this oil has gone to Caribbean storage facilities in Curaçao, St. Lucia, and the Bahamas. Though it's ultimately expected to end up in U.S. refineries, the human element here cannot be ignored. Venezuela was on the brink of complete economic collapse. The believer's value had crashed on the black market, bringing the country close to another round of hyperinflation. We're talking about a humanitarian crisis that was being measured in days, not weeks. Now, let's break down the mechanics of how this deal actually works, because when you understand the details, you start to see just how unprecedented this situation really is. First, the scale of what we're dealing with. Venezuela currently produces about 1.2 million barrels of oil per day according to December 2025 data. That's down from over 3 million barrels per day in the early 2000s. The country has proven oil reserves estimated at 300 billion barrels, the largest in the world. But here's the problem. Years of mismanagement, sanctions, and underinvestment have absolutely devastated the infrastructure needed to extract and export that oil. When Trump imposed the blockade in December, Venezuela's limited storage capacity filled up fast. The country has approximately 48 million barrels of total storage capacity on land, though not all of it is functional. According to Chaos, a data analytics firm tracking this situation, Venezuela was running out of places to put the oil it was producing. Think about that for a moment. You've got the world's largest oil reserves, but your storage tanks are full and you can't sell anything. That's when production has to stop. And stopping oil production doesn't work like turning off a faucet. Here's the technical reality that most people don't understand. When you shut down oil fields, especially the type of heavy crude Venezuela produces, you risk permanent damage to the reservoir. The geology changes. The pressure dynamics shift, restarting production becomes exponentially more expensive and time-consuming. Venezuelan officials were staring down a nightmare scenario where their entire oil industry could suffer irreparable harm within days. Enter the U.S. Department of Energy. According to the New York Times, the DOE approached Trafigura and VTOL shortly after Maduro's capture and asked them to execute the sale of trapped Venezuelan oil. Why these two companies specifically? Both firms have the unique capacity to buy and ship large volumes quickly. We're talking about organizations with the global infrastructure, buyer relationships, and financial resources to move millions of barrels in a matter of days. The pricing structure reveals something interesting about market dynamics right now. These trading companies are paying Venezuela approximately $50 per barrel, which industry analysts say is a market price significantly above the roughly $30 that Venezuela was getting paid for oil it previously exported to China, while circumventing American sanctions. So, Venezuela is actually getting a better deal under U.S. management than it was getting on the black market. But here's the kicker. The revenue isn't going directly to Venezuela's government.